Good evening and welcome to the Italian Impact Podcast. I am your host, Steve Stefano Mancini. And as always, I want to thank my listeners from around the world who are taking time out of their busy schedules to listen to little old me. As I've been saying lately, I'm always impressed when I go and look and see where people are tuning in from. I don't know how you're finding me, but just keep finding me because I love it. And the result of that is I'm better able then to bring even better guests. And I've got a wonderful one tonight, and I can't wait to get started. But before I do, a couple of quick, as I like to jokingly say, administrivia. As everyone knows by now, I have been appointed by the Italian government as the honorary Italian consular here in Pittsburgh. And I'm continuing to see folks, dealing with as many issues as I can, a lot of administrivia, but it's everything from, passport renewals to questions on visas, the cittadinanza, the famous citizenship question, to just needing witnesses or just needing somebody to comfort you while you go through some sort of bureaucracy with the Italian government, who is doing its best to compete with the United States government and who can be the slowest bureaucracy around. That will be determined over time. The second thing I want to let everyone know is a friendly reminder. This is the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. I think it's sad that a lot of people don't really appreciate that. I'm kind of a passionate historian. It's not my major in college, but it is something that I've always been passionate about since I was very little. So what? Well, the decisions that were made 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago have all, they've impacted your life. So how much more than a major world war less than 100 years ago has impacted your life? The state of the world, in a lot of ways, is the result of things that happened 80 to 100 years ago. The problems in the Middle East go back, but there are certain things that are relatively new that stem from that war. Same thing with certain relationships in Asia. Same thing with relationships in Europe. So what? Well, as you know, I've filmed a documentary last year called Fedelta, Soldier Prisoner, and that chronicled the story of 1,250 Italian prisoners of war. Their families are going to be coming back here to the United States because 80 years ago, when their fathers and grandfathers were repatriated back to Italy, they were treated so well, it meant so much to them that now the generation after and the generation after that have a great love and appreciation for the American people. So I am encouraging you that if you are able to do this, September 11th in Chambersburg, PA, the families, about 30 family members from Italy, will be coming to visit the chapel that was built by the Italian prisoners of war. So I am hoping to see you there September 11th, that we can celebrate the end of the 80th anniversary of the end of the war. And again, I'll be there. A lot of folks will be there. Visitors from Italy will be there, and I really hope to see you there. And hopefully you can take in this beautiful chapel that is, a symbol of peace, and it's a symbol of perseverance even in the toughest times. So again, hope to see you there in September, and that's all I can say about that. But it has definitely inspired me to do more, so more details to follow. Now, with that being said, I want to be, very, diplomatic about this next piece. I am going to be having an open house here in Pittsburgh to celebrate the opening of the Italian consulate. I'm inviting everyone that wants to come and visit on May 30th to the honorary Italian consulate, downtown Pittsburgh. I will be there for a meet and greet. There are a lot of issues, and I know there's a lot of sensitivities with the new laws in Italy regarding citizenship, and I've been fielding a lot of calls. But if you want to come by and visit, please feel free. That's May 30th. I'll be there all day. Just stop in, say hello, and if you have any questions, I'll see what I can do for you. With that being said, without further ado, I want to jump into the guest because that is just plenty of administrivia for everyone. So I have a wonderful guest, and this is probably, I'm going to say, Lou, you might be one of the most successful people I've ever interviewed. Lou Ignarro is a Nobel Prize winner. This is going to be a really wonderful story, not because he won the Nobel Prize, because his background is exactly what we were talking a little bit before the show. This is exactly why I do this show. The positive impact of the Italian-American community is so overlooked. But more importantly, it kind of goes back to what I was just saying. When those immigrants came over here 100 years ago, 120 years ago, they came over here, they had no assurances that anything they were planning to do was going to work out. They had no assurances that the next generation would have it better than them. All they knew was the situation they were in was tough, and they wanted to have a better life for the next generation. And Lou is the perfect example of that. So Lou, without further ado, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Steve. It's really great to be here. And being Italian, of course, I'm very proud to be here and share all sorts of stories and information with the other viewers, whether you're Italian or not. So let me tell you something about myself, if I may. My mom and dad were born in Italy. My dad was born in Napoli, and my mom was born in Sicilia. They didn't know each other when they were in Italy. They separately, independently moved to another Italian neighborhood, namely Brooklyn, New York, where I think all Italians went back in the 1930s. And that's where they met and eventually got married. And then I came along in 1941, just before Pearl Harbor was bombed. How's that? That's my introduction to the world, the start of World War II rather. But the story I want to tell you is a very simple one, and that is that my dad was a carpenter in Italy, and also when he came to the U.S. My mom did not work in Italy, and when she came to the U.S., she just took care of her 7 brothers and sisters. The other point I want to make is that neither mom nor dad ever went to school, not even elementary school, nothing. So when I was born, they didn't speak English. And so I spoke and read and wrote in Italian. Because of my neighbors and friends, of course, who spoke English, I learned to speak English. But when I entered elementary school, my English was terrible. So my teachers called in my mom and dad to the school and told them that, your son doesn't speak or write English very well. His Italian is great, but we don't teach in Italian, and he needs to learn English. So that scared the hell out of my mother, who then decided she's never speaking a word of Italian at home. And she actually got tutored to learn to speak English so that she and I could communicate in English, and that's how my English improved. My dad, being a stubborn Neapolitan, said, no, I no learn English, and he never learned English. It took him 40 years before he could speak English. And so eventually, because I learned to communicate in English, I was able to do well in my courses early on. The first few years were not very good, but after a while, they got better, and I was just motivated to learn more English so that I could study in school because I wanted to be a good student. So that's how it all started.
Let me ask you that, because you wanted to be a good student, but was it a passion for learning, or was it more about I just didn't want to be singled out because my English wasn't very good?
It was both of those. I had some great friends I was born in Brooklyn, but raised close by in Long Beach, Long Island, New York. And my closest friends would never, make fun of my poor English. The more distant friends did. And sometimes that resulted in a lot of fist fights, not involving me, but my close friends who really liked me would fight the other guys who would make fun of my English. But eventually all that disappeared and everything was good. The other reason why I wanted to learn was early on, when I was about 9 or 10 years old, I was playing around with a chemistry that my mom and dad bought for me. And I just, all of a sudden, just like that, developed a great interest in chemistry. Again, 10, 11 years old. So to make a long story short, I learned how to make firecrackers and rocket fuel, which turned out to be small bombs. I was a very mischievous child in the neighborhood, sending up rockets and causing all kinds of explosions. And I did that because I just had a passion for understanding how chemistry works. I think the key word here is curious. I was the most curious child there was. Why is the sky blue? how do we hear? How do we see? On and on and on. And I had to have answers to these questions in order to get to sleep at night. And this is very unlike any of my friends of the same age. They did not care at all about science. I loved science, and that motivated me to study, study, study. So my science grades were all A plus, mathematics, A plus. However, when we got to history, geography, English, we're talking about a C minus, a C. Eventually, I matured enough so that I was able to bring up those lower grades to a better grade, and that's how I got into college.
So let me go back here because what's interesting is when I talk to a lot of folks whose parents immigrated in the 20s and 30s, a lot of those parents wanted to leave Italy behind. And so there was a push to Americanize their children. That push wasn't natural for your family. It was more out of necessity on your mother, and to your kind of comical point, your father being stubborn said, I'm not going to do it. I think it's kind of interesting because that's almost not the norm from what I've seen. Would you agree with that?
Well, I mean, I think in a way they tried to Americanize me. I don't know if I should use the word Americanize. Let me explain. My dad, as I said before, was a carpenter, hardly spoke any English. I mean, he would go to work at 6 in the morning, come home at 6 at night, work on weekends. His hands were always sore and bleeding and so on. And he would always say to me, he said, Luigi, that's my name in Italian. He would say, I want you to do good in school. I want you to be somebody. I don't want you to be a carpenter, a working man like me, or your uncles. My dad's brothers also were longshoremen, carpenters, whatever. He said, I want you to go to school, be something. I want you to be a doctor. I want you to be a lawyer, anything but a politician. No politics in this family. That's what he said. So he didn't make much money, but he did whatever he could to ensure that I had a good education and was able to just go on and do things that he and his family had never done.
And that's the opportunity that a lot of people don't understand. And I'm going to make a leap of faith. Years later, would you ever talk to your father? Did you ever ask him if he was, like, did you ever have the conversation, hey, Father, were you ever sure this was going to work out? Like, what was his expectations when he came here?
Oh, well, he did not think that any of this would work out, mainly because, first of all, the language barrier was terrible. He couldn't speak English. He came to the U.S. My dad was much older than my mom, maybe 18 years older. And so, and he lived till he was 96 years old. So, but when he came over in the 20s, I know he came over in the 20s, no English. He because he was a carpenter in Italy and a carpenter on the ship when he came over, he became a carpenter in New York, in Brooklyn. He had a tremendous voice. He could sing opera like you wouldn't believe. Okay, I mean, an incredible voice, and they wanted him to do a radio show, to sing on the radio. This was well before TV, of course. And he would do that, but he felt embarrassed because he couldn't speak English. He couldn't answer any questions, whatever. So that gradually faded away, and he worked as a carpenter, a really good carpenter. But whenever there were weddings and parties and so on, he was the star of the whole show because he sang. And what a voice he had. It was unbelievable. So to answer your question, he didn't really think anything great was going to happen. He loved his homeland in Naples. He loved it dearly, but he wanted to establish a new life in the U.S., eventually with my mom and a family.
Now, talking about growing up, obviously the Italian culture, you're just completely immersed in it. The fact that he didn't speak English that way, or that well, excuse me, and the fact that your mother had to kind of learn it, they were basically off the boat. So what they're doing is what they know, and what they knew was from Italy. Do you carry a lot of that with you still, or did you kind of lose that over the years, do you think?
Oh, no. I love my mom and dad. My dad worked so hard. For me, he he couldn't afford it, but he wanted me to have some things that my friends had. And my friends were much wealthier. And so every once in a while, my dad would surprise me with a brand new bicycle, and I knew that he couldn't afford that. He would, be sure that my mom could get me nice looking shoes and so on, back then. And then the biggest surprise was my graduation from high school, which was in 1958. In front of the house, I walk out. He says, "Happy birthday," and he sings me, "Happy Birthday" in Italian. And there's a brand new car,
Wow.
a Ford, brand new car. And I mean, I lost it. I cried. It was unbelievable. And I know that set him back. My God. Uh, and so I'll never forget that. And because of that, and the way my mom prepared herself to work with me, I just I embrace everything my parents represent, being Italian, being immigrants. I never take anything for granted. I've never become spoiled. Even now, when I'm making good money, I always, I'm very careful about how I spend my money, and I keep thinking back to my family and also my friends who were Italian, who were still in Italy, for example. I love to go back to Italy to visit, and they're all in Napoli, which is where my dad was born, and I feel like that's my home country as well.
Right. Well, you know what's funny you say that because when I go back, there's something. You're a doctor. You can explain, or a scientist. You can understand this possibly. That there's some kind of genetic memory or something that seems to be that. I remember the first time I went back to Italy, and I felt like I'd been there. I don't know how to explain it. I felt like I was home. I felt like almost like a historical memory that I knew I didn't have, but yet there was something that immediately connected. And every time I go back, I feel that, and I cannot explain it. I'm proud to be American. I grew up here.
Right.
I served 20 years in the United States military. But there is just something, I don't know if it's in the genes, Lou, but there's something that when I go there, I feel that that I'm just captivated and connected to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it could be in the genes. I mean, all this is genetic, and there's so much we don't know about genetics and hereditary traits. There are hereditary traits, your eyes, your mouth, your voice can sound like your parents or uncle or aunt or whatever. But there's probably so much else that's hereditary in the brain, recognition, and so on. But the one thing that got me, I remember hanging around my family, a huge family. My dad had brothers and sisters and, you know, uncles and aunts I had everywhere. And we would go to Brooklyn at least 2 or 3 times a month and mingle with them. And they, of course, all spoke Italian. So that's how I kept up my Italian, even though I was learning to speak English. But the food, the way they played music and sang and danced and partied, their way of thinking. So all that builds up, builds up. And then I make my first visit to Italy with my parents when I was a young teenager. That's the first time they took me by ship, by the way. It took about a week to get there. And so we get to Italy, and I say to myself, oh my God, this is just like Brooklyn. Everybody's behaving the same way, saying the same thing, acting the same way.
Was
The
that good or
food,
bad?
food is the same. No, it was good. That's why I'm so proud to be Italian. Oh, and I tell everybody I'm proud to be Italian, especially my Jewish friends who live all around me.
So let's talk about that. So the work ethic. You know, there's a lot of smart people in this world that'll never achieve the greatness that the good Lord has intended for them. And a lot of it comes down to work ethic. I remember I used to coach hockey for years. A lot of talented
Right.
players, and they never made it. And you go, they weren't putting 100% in. Clearly, that was from your father, that work ethic. Yes?
Oh, yes. Unbelievable. I mean, the work ethic, exactly. He, again, he didn't not have to do any science or reading or writing. I mean, he was a carpenter, but what an incredible carpenter. I mean, he would be able to make a circle, a perfect circle with his fingers and a pencil without using a compass. I mean, he figured out things that I would use today, a calculator, to calculate angles and how to build this and put the wood together. And it was all up there. I could never figure out how the hell he knew how to do that when he never went to school and never had training. It was unbelievable. So, but he worked very hard and he was very proud. And I saw what he was doing with his money for my brother and I. I have a brother who's 3 years younger, Angelo, of course, Luigi and Angelo. Uh,
Couldn't get more
and
traditional than that.
no, you can't. And so I got all of my work ethic from him. My mom a little bit as well, but especially my dad. And when my dad passed away, he passed away in the mid 1980s. Like I said, he was 96 years old. That was right in the prime of my scientific research career. I could always remembered him, how hard he worked, what he did, what he was able to do without an education. And I said to myself, well, if he can do all that without an education, then I can certainly do a lot more with an education. And that's what I did.
Is there any correlation between what you do research on and your family? Like some people, for example, they might go into medicine, they had a sick relative or somebody who died when they were young and it made an impact on them and they say, you know what, I'm going to become a doctor and find a cure for that. Is there any of the
Yeah.
decisions you made in your career that were directly the result of your family?
Well, let me tell you, not directly as a result of my family, but a next door neighbor when I was growing up. But let me tell you, my family, I'm very lucky. Oh my goodness, am I lucky? My dad dies at 96, my mom in 90. She would have lived to 100, but she was so overweight for all of her life that it finally took a toll on her. My uncles died over 100 years old, aunts over 100. Nobody had cancer. Nobody had anything. No one had a heart attack that I know of. My dad smoked 2 packs of unfiltered Camel cigarettes for 75 years. I think he was the first person in the US who smoked a Camel cigarette. Anyway, he lived until, as I said, he was 96 years old. He went to the hospital, I think, when he was 95, and then he would come home, went back to the hospital. And I remember the doctor walking in when I was there and saying that, my dad's doing okay, but he's got to rest. And he made the comment that it's really nice to see that your dad, at such an age, never smoked any cigarettes. You know why? He said that there was no cough, nothing. My dad never had a cough. So when the doctor left, he tells my mother, he says, he's a quack. I used to smoke all of my life, and he tells me I don't smoke. So, I mean, we are resistant to disease. And I hope that
I was gonna
continues
say, I'm going to make the
with
sign of the
me.
cross on that.
I mean, and the other similarity we all had, which is unfortunate, is no hair. My dad lost his hair when he was in his 20s, so did I, and even some of my aunts have extremely thin hair. So we can't talk about, hair follicles.
Now, this does tie into, obviously, you do research and you win the Nobel Prize. This was sort of what you're doing now, that focusing on health?
Yes,
And so let's
yes.
talk about
But
that, please.
the thing that really got me was my next door neighbor. I was in high school at the time, going back and forth to school, and my neighbor, his name was Samuel. I remember he was a little obese, and he walked home from the train station a couple of blocks away, and as he was coming into his house, I was outside playing ball. He fell. So I ran over to him, and he was unconscious, almost unconscious. And so I screamed out, to Mrs. Abrams. Their name was Abrams. And so she comes running out and she goes up to him and she gives him a tiny tablet and puts it under his tongue. And then we're resting there. And in 2 minutes, he gets up. And then about 5 minutes later, he gets up and he's fine. And carefully, I help, his wife get him into the house. And so he was suffering from an impending heart attack. That was the start of a heart attack. And he took a drug that's been available for 150 years called nitroglycerin. I don't know if the viewers know. Nitroglycerin, yes, it is an explosive developed by Alfred Nobel to make dynamite. However, it's also a drug and it works in very small amounts. So she put the drug under his tongue and he got better. Well, from that point on, lots of questions in my curious mind. What the hell was that drug? How does an explosive lower your blood pressure and increase blood flow to the heart and brain so you recover from a heart attack? That drug instantly removes your chest pain and left arm pain when you're having a heart attack. And I wanted to know how that drug worked. That's what got me interested in the science and the chemistry of drugs, and also cardiovascular disease, because many of my neighbors died when they were in their 50s from heart attack or stroke. But all my other friends, their parents were 80, 90 years old and didn't have heart problems. And so my simple question to myself was, why do some people die of cardiovascular disease and other people don't? I pursued that until I found the answer in 1986, which got me the Nobel Prize. The first thing we did was we showed that this nitroglycerin I was telling you about is converted in the body, it's metabolized, converted in the body into a small molecule, which is nitric oxide, óxido nítrico, nitric oxide. So we discovered how nitroglycerin works after 150 years. And then I figured, my God, maybe our body produces this nitric oxide in order to prevent us from getting heart attack and stroke. And maybe those people who get cardiovascular disease don't make enough of this molecule. So we looked and we discovered that our arteries produce nitric oxide and that people who are not healthy make much less. And that, in essence, is why I was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1998.
Now, now that is not something that necessarily, well, I'm going to make a leap of faith that maybe it is, that you can supplement and augment your body with, but does that undo effects of, for example, blockages in the arteries? Because ultimately these, heart attacks and strokes come down to blockages. Does this somehow reduce the blockage? Is that what this allows to happen?
Well, when we make this molecule of nitric oxide in the blood vessels, as long as you keep making it, and this is very important for the listeners and viewers, as long as you keep making the nitric oxide, you will not get high blood pressure, your blood will not clot, you will not get a stroke, your blood vessels will not develop cholesterol plaques, which means you won't get coronary artery disease. You'll be healthy until you die of some other reason. Okay, however, like cancer, for example, or an accident. However, so many people don't make normal amounts of nitric oxide. Why? Because they're not careful about what they eat, and they're overweight, and they lead a sedentary lifestyle. One of the things we showed, but then was showed by at least 10,000 other scientists, is that if you eat healthy, and I can explain what healthy is if you want, but if you eat healthy, you make a lot of this nitric oxide. If you eat unhealthy, for example, saturated fats, too much salt, lots of sugar, especially fructose in soda drinks, all of those chemicals inhibit the production of nitric oxide in your body, and NO goes down, down, down. We instead of saying nitric oxide, we also say NO, because nitric oxide is really a molecule that has one atom of nitrogen, N, and one atom of oxygen, O, so NO. So if you eat an unhealthy diet, you make much less NO. If you eat a healthy diet, you keep making a lot. Physical activity is incredibly important. The more people engage in physical activity, even walking, just walking a half hour a day, that's all you need. You stimulate, because of the movements, you stimulate your body to make nitric oxide, okay? And that nitric oxide is what will keep you healthy for decades to come. And the reason why your body makes NO when you exercise is because NO widens the blood vessels. It makes them wider so that there's more blood flowing through, right? Well, when you're exercising, walking, playing ball, swimming, soccer, whatever you're doing, you need to have more blood going to your working muscles. And that's the function of NO. But that same NO, by promoting your workouts, will also prevent heart attack, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. That became so profound, and that a lot of that is the work of other people, but it became so profound that the Nobel Committee decided, well, here is an original discovery that our bodies make NO, and the benefit to humankind is incredibly obvious. So that's why I got the prize.
The irony that what you just said is I don't have the best diet, but but I've always been a cardio workout person, a lot of running, a lot of jogging.
Good.
And the funny
Yes.
thing was, is a few months ago I did one of the calcium scan where they do
That's
the
right.
CAT scan, and I was
course.
like, there's no way. With my, I don't want to say garbage diet. I don't drink sodas and stuff like that, but I'm a sweet tooth. But I said, there's no way, there's going to be something there. When she came back and said 0%, I was like,
That's great.
exactly. And but to your point is, I think our bodies are resilient. Our bodies want to live. It's almost like we kill it by doing what we do, and it is all diet and exercise. And I don't
couldn't
care.
put it in better words.
Right. And so,
Thank you for saying that.
yeah, and I think that it's incredible what we eat. And I'm not a saint here. I'm saying I think now the things I eat, whether I'm going to eat a hamburger at a fast food or once in a while you have a soda or a piece of cake,
Right.
and that wouldn't be so bad. Everything in moderation. But the people that eat that on a regular basis, these processed foods, these chemicals, it's like
They're
you are
killing
literally killing yourself, and then you throw on, and they don't exercise. And we are inherently
Right.
created a sedentary culture. We have an absolute
Amazing.
recipe for early death.
We do. You know, the last 20 years of my career, I've gone around speaking quite a bit, and everybody wants to know the science, you know, why I got the Nobel Prize, what is nitric oxide? And I talk to a lot of doctors and people and so on, but I spend a little bit of time talking about the science of the research, but most of the time I talk about the value of nitric oxide. In other words, the best way to stay healthy is free. Eat a healthy diet, cut out all the garbage, that'll save you money, but engage in physical activity. And I'm always talking about the fact that if everyone, no matter how old you are, if you go outside and you walk 30 minutes a day, 3 or 4 days a week, it's been shown and published many articles. There are even government guidelines about that. You will live much, much longer. And that's because you're making this nitric oxide, which has been proven over and over again, and that protects you. But instead, you know, if people don't understand the nitric oxide, that's why I try to write books about it. But, you know, it's so hard to get the news media to talk about it. But we are killing ourselves, like you said, because we're eating hamburgers not once a month or once a week, but every day. Everything we eat, packaged foods, you know, drinking all that Coca-Cola and all these other drinks. You know, on top of that, having cake, and then to put the icing on the cake, so to speak, we're having C's candies and all of this. And by the way, I love C's candies, but I limit myself to that.
It's everything
You
in
know,
moderation.
And then top it off with ice cream and apple pie. I mean, give me a break, you know, give your body a break. And those people usually are obese and are not exercising. So it's a double whammy to decrease nitric oxide. And I'm sorry, you're going to be in deep trouble later on.
Well, that's right. And the pharmaceutical industry will love you because they'll be able to sell you 20 different prescriptions that are going to basically treat your symptoms, when a lot of this comes down to lose the weight and exercise and cut out the junk food. It's not rocket science. No offense, Lou.
No, right. Well, I don't do rocket science. I don't know how to do rocket science, but I can give you some good drugs. You know, just so that the viewers. And do you know about one of the drugs that I was directly responsible for? The drug is great because when you're taking it to increase your physical activity, but we made some discoveries in the early 90s to show how the nerves release nitric oxide to stimulate erectile function and sexual arousal. we got a lot of nice publications about that. I was interviewed on every TV station known to humans. And a few years later, Pfizer Pharmaceutical Company developed a drug based on our discovery, and that drug is Viagra.
Oh.
So often
I
I'm
hope you're
known
getting
as
a 10% cut of
Il
that.
Padre di Viagra. I'm known as the father of Viagra. But no, I didn't make a nickel off the drug. You know why? Because the work I did is physiology.
Right.
We discovered that our bodies produce nitric oxide to stimulate erectile function. You can't take a patent out on that because it's a natural it's just a natural thing in the body. And of course, we do research so that drug companies could take advantage of the research in order to develop new drugs. So no, I don't make a dollar that way. However, Pfizer has taken care of me in many ways by making incredible contributions to good causes that I ask them to do, to pay for many and many, many of my trips abroad, to give lectures that those schools cannot afford. Pfizer always comes through. They should. They've made $1 trillion from my discovery.
No kidding. Lou, again, I want to thank you very much for joining me today. Some very good information. How about some contact information if folks want to reach out and learn more? Where can they read and learn more about what the work you're doing?
Well, I mean, what I can do is I've written, one book that was published 2 years ago, and it's really mostly about what I'm saying, what I've said during the show, and it's called Dr. No. NO stands for nitric oxide. It's called Dr. No, and it was published a couple of years ago, and it's widely available on Amazon, for example. And so if they, want to learn more about me, my total complete story, including about the Nobel Prize and the work I did, they can get it from that book.
Fantastic. And I tell you what, I'm going to put that link to the book down in the description. I am actually probably going to get a copy as well, Lou, because I am intrigued by all of this, because my family, it's so weird. To your point, it's like they seem to have done the right things to live long, but then in some ways they've done the wrong things. You're like, wow, why did this person live so long? I get it. Yeah. Like we said, genetics plays a part, but I do think, right. I think overwhelmingly it's lifestyle. Genetics can only save you so much from you.
Yeah.
But
yes.
You have
lifestyle
right.
is important. In cardiovascular disease, okay, heart attack, stroke, diabetes, and so on, then lifestyle is 90% of the problem. Genetics is not that much of a problem in cardiovascular disease. Different cancers, yes. But if people would really follow the rules in terms of healthy lifestyle, we'd get rid of 90% of the heart attack, strokes, and type 2 diabetes, for sure.
Oh, that's incredible. And like I said, and the answers are out there. And I don't mean this like in a condescending way, but in a lot of ways, this isn't some mystery. Diet and exercise, right. Diet and exercise. But I think people, I just think they don't want to believe it. They want to believe
They don't want to believe in it. We've known for thousands of years, and you've heard this phrase: exercise is good for your health. People were saying that 1,000 years ago, okay? Aristotle, Plato, all those people. We did not know how or why, but now because of this nitric oxide, we know that there's a scientific evidence for that statement, and people should know it. I mean, if I had my own, national TV show, where I could come on once a week or twice a week and just talk the way I'm talking to you, I'll bet you anything we could cut back on cardiovascular disease. The thing is, people don't know it. They don't read it. They don't want to buy a book about it. The news media won't cover it, because it's not sports, it's not this, it's not that. And, here I go again. I mean, it's so easy to lead a healthy lifestyle, and that would save so many people from passing away at a young age.
Well, but you know what? The irony, real quick. Well, we said goodbye. We're doing the Italian goodbye, Lou. We're going to say it 7 times. But you know what? The irony in what you just said, though, we are literally talking life or death. And when you think how many people are dying of cardiovascular disease every year, and how much of it is preventable, And there is
Right.
no moral outrage. There's no society like, oh my God, all these people are dying. We can stop this. We could lower
I know.
the cost of insurance. We could lower healthcare costs. We could do a lot of things just
Yes.
by changing
Yes.
lifestyle. And people say, nah.
Just by changing lifestyle.
I'd rather
Yeah.
I'd rather roll the die, live the way I want, and then when I'm 70, hopefully they'll have a cure for it by then, and otherwise I'll drag an
That's
oxygen.
what people
You're
think.
right. Yeah.
That's what people think. It's unbelievable. Well, you're preaching to the choir, and so am I could see. So we're on the same page
Absolutely.
for sure. It's probably because we're both Italians. So, we can think more.
And we're
logically
terrified
than
because we
anybody
know
else.
we don't always eat the healthiest diet with the sausage and the sauce and the meatballs and the pasta with the carbs.
But sometimes we just add little bits of sausage and meatballs. The pasta is okay, and the sauce is usually tomatoes.
Right,
so
that's true.
So that's okay, and a little lemon ricotta pie is okay too every now and then.
Oh, I love it. Now I'm hungry. Lou, I want to thank you again. Now we're going to do the real Italian
Okay.
goodbye. Listen, I thank you again for joining me. I really appreciate that. And like I said, I'll put the link to the book, and I am definitely going to stay in touch with you because I'm going to have more
Good.
questions.
Let's do that. Let's do that.
Absolutely.
And maybe I can ask you later on, by email, something about passports that you were talking about.
Heck
and
yeah.
also, if
Listen,
you
I know
ever
some
want
people
me-
in the government. I can take care of you now.
Okay, all right. If you ever want me on the show again for any reason, don't hesitate to call me and let me know because I'll say yes immediately.
Awesome. Thank Lou. You're going to be back on the show because I feel like we didn't talk long enough, and there's actually more stuff I wanted to go with you. But Lou, thank you again very much for your
All right.
time. God bless
All
you.
right.
Stay healthy, and I can't wait to get you back on sooner rather than later.
All right, thanks. Take
Awesome.
care.
All right,
Grazie.
all right,
Bye-bye.
folks. We'll be right back. Hello, Bucko fans. This is Steve Stefano Mancini, international award-winning filmmaker and host of the award-winning Italian Impact podcast. Join us in celebrating the Italian community on August 23rd as the Pirates take on the Colorado Rockies. This special offer includes an exclusive Pirates co-branded Italian hat and loaded value, good to use on concessions and merchandise on the day of the game. Also, a portion of each ticket will be donated to a local Italian charity. So come experience a unique blend of sports, culture, and community during Italian Heritage Night at PNC Park. Grazie, ci vediamo.
Ciao, Chrissy. Your Italian got so much better. Brava.
Grazie. It's because I learned the best way possible.
How so?
Well, I learned that with apps, grammar books, and even YouTube videos, I could only get so far. I had to immerse myself. I noticed I did best when I was in Italy visiting family. That's where my level really soared.
And wow, did it work?
Thanks. I became much more confident, fast. That's why I created Footsteps Through Time. It's an Italian language experience. You don't just take Italian classes, you immerse yourself in a real Italian village. With lots of fun activities and excursions, it's life-changing.
I see. So, no more boring grammar, impersonal apps, just real conversations, real culture, and delicious food, of course.
Exactly. I'm so excited about this. Learn Italian by actually becoming part of the local community for a week and living it. So if you've been dreaming of Italy and the language, check out Footsteps Through Time in Italy.com. Book now and join the experience.
Andiamo!
Thanks to Greater Pittsburgh Travel. For any of your travel needs, let Tom and the team at Greater Pittsburgh Travel know, and they'll take care of you. For more information, call 412-331-2244 or visit their website at www.greaterpittsburghtravel.com. For all of your plumbing needs, be sure to try Palucci Plumbing. Nick and the team have decades of experience and will get you back up and running. For more information, call Palucci Plumbing at 412-782-5050. And we want to thank the Calabria Club of Pittsburgh. If you're interested in learning more, you can find their contact information on Facebook at Calabria Club of Pittsburgh. Again, thanks Domenica and the team at the Calabria Club of Pittsburgh for your support. And we want to thank La Scuola d'Italia Galileo Galilei, the only nonprofit school in Pittsburgh endorsed by the Italian Consulate. If you're interested in learning Italian or have your children being immersed in the Italian culture and language, be sure to give them a call at 412-404-7070. And that's La Scuola d'Italia Galileo Galilei. We'd also like to thank Chris Gonzalez from the Knights of Columbus. If you have any questions about joining the Knights of Columbus, reach out to Chris Gonzalez at 412-605-9074. All right, folks, I want to thank you for sticking around. And again, I want to thank Lou for joining me for the first half. Great conversation. Lou's done a lot of work, obviously a Nobel Prize winner. It's like we were talking about, food and exercise is everything. Italians, as you know, we have a wonderful diet, and we are the secret to healthy life. But for the second part, I'm going to just kind of switch gears a little bit. I have two wonderful young ladies. One has been on the show before, and one is a successful author, and we're going to talk a little bit about her book. So I want to welcome first Melissa Marinaro from the Heinz History Center, and Mary Ferro, who is the author. But Mary, before we jump into the book, I know that you and Melissa obviously know each other very well. I want to just ask a quick kind of question just to kind of get us started, though. Melissa, besides what's happening in the Heinz History Center, how do you and Mary know each other?
Well, I met Mary probably a decade ago. We've worked together in different capacities. She has donated materials to the History Center about her family and about her involvement with the group I Campagnoli. And she's also performed with I Campagnoli at our Italian Heritage Day. So I've had the pleasure of seeing Mary perform, and I know her story very well, and I was so happy when she decided to put it into print.
And that's kind of why I wanted to start there. So a lot of folks that are listening to the show, you know, the Italian community, in one way, we're very large, very diverse, but at the same time, you know, whenever there's interaction and we get to know each other, we really bond. And through that bonding, we can, you know, to expand out and introduce to other folks. So this is the perfect example of having worked with Melissa. Melissa worked with Mary. It's your standard networking story, but it's also the importance of continuing to preserve the Italian culture, because every little thing we're doing, we're making an impact on someone else. And at some point, they're going to carry that impact that you made to them onto someone else. And so that kind of summarizes a little bit why I keep trying to bring such diverse folks on here and keep reaching out to you, the audience, and say, listen, if there's someone that made that impact in your life, someone from the Italian American community that you remembered something, they said, I remember that. That was really awesome and they did a great job. That's why I want you to reach out to me, and I'd love to have them on the show. Now, Melissa, real quick, what's going on with the Heinz History Center? Because I know there's some stuff coming down that I know listeners are very interested in.
Yes, we have two great programs coming up in the next month. First, of course, is going to be Mary's book presentation. That will be on Thursday, May 22nd. It is a free program. We do encourage you to go on our website and sign up, so we make sure we save a chair for you. But Mary and I will be in conversation about her book, and she'll also be doing a book signing, so you can get a copy at the History Center. Then, on Sunday, June 1st, we're going to have an Italian genealogy workshop. We are bringing in guest speaker, genealogist Rich Venezia, who is going to do a full day of presentations. This has been sponsored by the Italian Sons and Daughters of America. So it's been wonderful that we've been able to collaborate with them. So if you are an ISD member, you get a discount on your ticket.
Now, the funny story is, again, to further show that what I'm saying is not just the ramblings of a madman, a little bit, but not entirely. So Rich Venezia was the one that helped me years ago when I was doing all of my ancestry and ultimately ended in my getting my Italian citizenship. So again, this wonderful small world that we live in. So for the folks that are listening, if there is someone in your life that made a difference, especially if they're of the Italian-American persuasion, please reach out. I'd love to get them on the show. And, you know, depending on who they are, I'm sure Melissa would love to see them over at the Heinz History Center, again, further promoting the Italian culture. Now, Melissa mentioned a book signing. Welcome, Mary. Let's talk about your book, and let's first start with you. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, Steve, I'm a retired music teacher, and when I retired, I decided to write a book about my family's life, and it's called From Calabria to Carnegie, and in subtitles, it's Music for Bread. So I wrote a page a day, and I was just going to keep it in my chest of drawers, and a friend of mine had called me and said, Mary, you're going to have to call this Word Association Publishing Company because they're going to love it. And I said, well, I don't know what I'm doing. So I just called them, and they said, well, send us the manuscript, and we'll figure it out. And before you know it, two weeks later, they called, and they said, we not only like it, we love it. But I didn't intend to write a book, but it became a book. And it's the story of my family's life. Music for Bread part is, I'll explain that later. But it's a beautiful story, and even as a child, I was very perceptive, and I thought I'd really like to share my family's life with the rest of the world, but I don't see how I could ever do it. And then my mother ended up being the director of ISDA's I Campagnoli, and we traveled extensively throughout the United States. We were the first Italian-American folk group to travel throughout Italy. And speaking of awards, we were received the Medal of Peace from the Mayor of Rome when we were there. And it's just a story of people didn't have anything. We didn't know we didn't have anything. They came here with nothing, and they gave us everything.
Now let's talk about that. Are you first generation?
I am.
Okay.
My father was born in Sant'Ilario in Calabria.
All right.
And
Now,
Sant'Ilario is a very small little town that's outside of Reggio Calabria. And he was born there, and his father did as many immigrants had done. He came to the New World right before World War II to find work, so then he could eventually send for his wife and 3 children. Well, my father, he always wanted to attend the university because he wanted to become a teacher. He always wanted to become a teacher. And during that time, it was during World War II. Now, Dad never spoke about the war much, but from what I understand, it was pretty brutal. And a professoressa took a liking to him and said, we will arrange for a place for you to stay here in Lockery at the university. You'll be still dodging bombs, but oh well. So he stayed there, became a teacher, and as soon as that happened, his father, who worked in the coal mines in western Pennsylvania, called him to come over to the States. Well, when they came to the States, his education counted for nothing, and at age 20, they put him in the 6th grade all over again. And he had to quit and find a job.
Wow.
Make some money.
So
and my mom's, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so your dad, your grandfather was here first?
Yes.
Okay, and then the war was the interruption to bringing your father over.
Yeah, well, right. Well, he couldn't bring them over till right after the war. And then they brought them over, and, they landed on Ellis Island, as the rest of them had. Most of them had. But my mom's story is it's pretty much the same, same thing. But her mother, who was illiterate in Italian and in English, had married a carabinieri in Italy. He came to this country again to make money, and she was 18 when he called for her, and she said to her mother, I'll never see you again, and she never did.
Wow. Because that is what makes the immigration of 100, 120 years ago different than the immigration from today. And it's not just the Italians. It was a lot of groups that were coming over here from different parts of Europe. And in many cases, especially the ones that came before World War II, think how many people died during the war.
Absolutely.
So even if they wanted to go back and find their family or go visit their town,
weren't there.
Exactly. And depending on what country they were, they really weren't there. Not the town, not the people, not anything.
Nobody.
So that's
my dad would say they had. Well, like I said, he didn't talk much about the war, but they had to find hiding places under bridges and et cetera, et cetera. Well, then my mother's mother, Giovanna was her name, finally came here on in steerage, and met. Joined up with her new husband, and she found herself expecting my older aunt, and her husband started developing severe headaches, because he, on the other hand, had been in World War I. So there she was expecting my first aunt, and they were increasing in intensity. Here he ends up dying from a brain tumor.
Oh.
And so my grandmother, who's going to have my aunt, who is illiterate, her father-in-law wrote to another brother here and said, you know what, I really would appreciate if you married Vittoria because she's carrying your brother's child. So his brother, and they had never met, married my grandmother, and they had 3 more children, and my mother was the baby.
Wow.
And she was Giovanna. So her sister's father would have been her uncle, but they did it out of necessity. I mean, they just had to.
And I'll bet people listening probably can't even imagine that. Like,
I
call your
can't
brother and go
imagine
go marry someone. His wife. He's passed away. I mean, just what a different time.
It was a different time, and then I like to talk a little bit about the music for bread, kind of a subtitle. My mom went to Catholic school at St. Philip's, and she was a baby, as I had said, and someone had given the Notas a free piano. so that the nun from the Catholic school came to my grandmother. Of course, any communication had to have been done orally. She said, you know what, baby Giovanna, they called her Janie, is so talented. She's going to have piano lessons. And my grandma says, what the heck are you talking about? I'm not going to afford a piano lesson. She said, I'll tell you what, Victoria, if you make me homemade Italian bread, I will give your daughter piano lessons. And that's how that all started. Yeah.
No, that's wonderful. You know, again, these are things that today, well, I'll tell you what, I'll tell you one funny story that's sort of related to that. You know, since I've taken the honorary consulate position, you know, I don't think people understand it is a non-paid position. I am appointed by the Italian government, but it's an honorary position. I don't get paid for it. So I'm helping, right? So I'm helping people because I want to help people. But they show up with a soprassato and the wine. I'm like, you don't have to bring me anything. I'm just waiting for somebody to show up with 2 live chickens to get the passport signed. It's like, you don't have to bring me anything. Just a thank you, and there you go. No chickens. But again, it's a different time zone where you barter for services. You barter for whatever. And
Absolutely.
And it's perfectly normal when you look back and think about it. Let's talk about when you grew up. Was the Italian culture something that was consciously passed on, or was this something you just did through observing?
Well, that's a very good question. Well, my mom, again, to communicate with my grandmother, and she decided the best time to practice the piano, because her older sisters had no musical talent whatsoever, was when they were washing the dishes. But she incorporated a lot of all the old Italian folk songs in her little repertoire that she had. And my grandmother, my nonna, would feel like she was back home, or had, vivid memories of the times back home. So then when my dad was from Reggio Calabria. They got married. He was 27. She was 17. They met in a church play. And my dad started bringing, all his Calabrese folk music to the household. I mean, we did American standards. We did everything. But there was always the Italian folklore playing in the background. And then they had friends. They were called the Caporellis. And they invited him to their house one night. They said, you know what, this new folk group is starting up. It's called I Campagnoli, and it's by the ISDA's I Campagnoli. And they said, oh, that's great. So they decided to join. And then they brought myself and my twin brother, God rest his soul, they brought us both to rehearsals. And I kept saying, Ma, it's too late for us. We have to go to school tomorrow. She goes, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. So we went to sleep a lot of the times, but by sheer osmosis, I remembered all that Italian folk music. And it was launched like the Queen Mary. It really was. And our first performance was at Carnegie Music Hall, and I was 7 years old, and I sang my very first solo with the group. Your
first performance was at Carnegie Music Hall? I mean, you talk about getting thrown into the fire. I mean, why not just make you sing opera in Rome on day one? Just go for it.
Why not? But I loved it. I mean, I had those butterflies, but they weren't anxious butterflies. They were excited butterflies, and that started the whole thing. And then after Professor Malfatti, and Gina Richards were the initial directors. They asked my mom to be the director, and then she asked my dad. She said, "Leonardo, what do you think?" He goes, "Do what do you want to do?" she always wanted to give back for those piano lessons.
Oh, that's nice.
Always wanted to give back to the community.
Tell me about the book then. How does the book morphs out of all of these experiences?
Yes, it does. It really does. And it tells a story of a more simple life. And we all lived in the same triplex. My twin brother and myself, my mom and dad lived on the top floor. My nonna lived in the middle. And my zio Giocondo and my zia Teresa with my 2 cousins lived on the bottom floor. We all lived in one tenement. We didn't have anything, but we were happy.
That's the truth.
Steve, it was a marvelous childhood. I mean, you didn't dare go to the drive-in and go to the concession stand. That would forget about it.
But you're smuggling in your sopressata and vino into the drive-in.
Well, definitely the vino. My dad would make vino religiously. It didn't matter if he was sick as a dog or whatever. He always had to have his wine making.
It was funny because that was one. I remember making wine as a kid. I remember just being able to drink it. It was like, well, you made it. Why not? You know?
Yeah, why not? I think people are too hard on wine drinkers.
I do too.
I think it's good for you.
As long as you're not a wino, we're okay. So let's talk about. Now you're going to be at the Heinz History. Let's talk about. You're going to be at the Heinz History Center. You're going to be signing the book. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yes, sir. I'm so grateful to Melissa. She's opened up this opportunity to have me go down and sign copies of the book, From Calabria to Carnegie.
All right.
Music for Bread.
And what's the date of that?
That would be May 22nd at 6 o'clock.
And I'm going to put a little link in the description down below so folks can click on that. And I hope to see folks there because that's only a week from now. So folks, get out there and support. Again, these are the opportunities to meet different people in the community, share experiences. It's a small world. You never know who you're going to run into. And again, if there's somebody that made an impact in your life, let me know. Would love to have them on the show. Mary, Melissa, what are your final thoughts?
Who first?
I'm just so
At the same time, it's easier that way.
I'm going to just express my gratitude to you, Steve, and to Mary, and to the community, because it is because of the community that we do the work we do at the History Center. And so we're always happy to share back with the community and to be a space, just as you described, Steve, for us to connect and to share our stories.
And I'm going to tell you something. And Melissa, I'm going to say something sincerely. From the bottom of my heart, that is so important, because if somebody doesn't put the effort and have that passion to preserve the history, it will be lost. And if you don't believe me, the folks in Bloomfield, go look at that old Italian church. It's now bulldozed.
Yep.
And that was a big symbol for the Italian community here in Pittsburgh, and they didn't bat an eye to run that thing into the ground. So now just another kind of black eye to the Italian community, and there's not much left. So I think if people got to make a decision, either you really believe in being Italian American or you don't. And if you do, then you need to put up. And if you're not going to put up, then don't talk about it, because it's, you put your money where your mouth is.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
Mary?
Totally agree.
I'm looking forward to meeting you.
Oh, I'm looking so forward to meeting you, Steve, and to, backtrack on Melissa's statement. I totally want to thank her. I want to thank you. And how dare we just sit here idly by when our ancestors went through so much to come here. They had nothing, received nothing, just the shirts on their backs, most of them.
And no handouts.
How dare we just sit idly? No handouts.
That's right. No handouts. Hard work.
We sit here idly by. We got to fight for our Italian community. That church was bulldozed and was a disgrace.
That's exactly right. And I was so angry. I literally couldn't even sleep that night. I was so just pissed off about the whole thing, because you know what? It was unnecessary. There was an offer on the table to buy that church.
I heard.
And it's just terrible. And then they would rather bulldoze it. So again, people don't appreciate or respect history, and they don't understand the effect on their life because of decisions that were made a long time ago. You can look back and say, well, it's just history. It doesn't matter. It's just a statue. There was a time when there was a group of people that said, it would be nice if we put a statue here to remember our forefathers. Now those people are, and to remind the future generations. Now those people are gone, and the future generations don't care, and they're not going to understand what it meant to those people that put those statues there, put that church there. Or like you said, they came here risking everything. Got on that boat with no assurances, and, it didn't always work out. So,
and not only that, Steve, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but when they got on to Ellis Island, I know if you passed your physical, you went to the right, you went to New York City. If the others went to the left, they went to New Jersey. You didn't want to be the middle of the road. After all that voyage, you had to walk down the center, and you were sent right back.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. People just don't understand that not everyone that came from Europe just walked into the United States.
Right.
We've always had standards. I don't understand why people don't understand that.
I agree with you 100%. There's nothing that makes me more angry than that. And because we had heard stories about how my father, oh my God, on the boat with his mother and his little sister and all of them, not just the Italians, but Polish people, a lot of them. They were on that boat across the Atlantic, not knowing if they were going to make it to the other side.
And it wasn't comfortable. Those old steel buckets, just sailing across the rough Atlantic. They didn't have radar, so you didn't know if a storm was coming. You were getting bebopped and bounced around 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on that thing, like you said, to hit Ellis Island and hope they let you in. And then if you got in, hoping, you got somewhere where you could get work, and then hoping that work was going to be enough to feed your family.
And they took the most remedial jobs.
They did anything to make it.
They did anything, whatever they never got a penny from anybody.
That's right.
Nobody gave them a penny. They were grateful to be here.
That's right.
And they did whatever they had to do. And not to mention that they would never see their family. Probably most of them never again.
And I personally had that experience because when I went back and met my relatives for the first time, I remember one of the older ladies was telling me that she remembers her mother talking about her uncle went to America and they never saw him because he died. He didn't live very long. He had a couple kids and then he died shortly after, and it was right after World War I. So it just wasn't, it was just a mess.
It had to have been. There's nothing that makes me more irate.
Well, folks, on that happy thought, we're going to see. I'm kidding. No. This is great. I'm looking forward to seeing you at the book signing. And Melissa, again, I want to thank you for everything you're doing. You've really been a staple for the Italian American community. And
I'd like to thank her too, Steve.
Awesome. All right, Melissa, Mary, get the heck out of here. I'm going to sign off. Folks, I want to thank you for tuning in. Another episode. I've got another great guest coming in next week. I think if all goes well, we're going to talk cittadinanza and the new laws. So speriamo. But in the meantime, you all have a wonderful and blessed week, and I will see you when I see you.